The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be the easy part. My aunt had driven 4 hours from Raleigh. My college roommate had flown in from Portland. 63 people sat at round tables in a private room at the Italian place my fiancé and I had picked because it had good lighting and a pasta dish his grandmother used to make. The bread was warm. The wine was open. Everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. Then my mother stood up from her chair, smoothed her blazer like she was about to give a quarterly report, and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "We need to leave. There's been a family situation." She didn't look at me when she said it. My father was already reaching for his jacket. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, and the only thing I could think was, don't make a face. Don't give them the reaction. 28 years of training, and it still worked even then, even when the room had gone the particular kind of quiet that happens when 63 people all stop pretending not to notice something at the exact same moment. My fiancé, sitting next to me, set down his wine very slowly. He didn't say anything yet. He just watched them leave. That's where this really starts. Not at the beginning, where I could have explained it away. At the end, where I finally couldn't. My name is Rachel. I'm 29. I work as a contracts coordinator for a mid-size architecture firm in Charlotte. The kind of job where you read the fine print on everything, which turns out to be useful in ways I never expected. I grew up in a suburb outside of Greensboro, North Carolina, in a house that looked perfectly fine from the outside. Colonial style. Two-car garage, a flagpole my father actually used. My brother Liam is 3 years older. He's always been the kind of person who fills a room before he even opens his mouth. Broad shoulders, easy laugh, the kind of guy who can talk to anyone at a bar for 20 minutes and walk away with their business card. My parents thought he was the sun. Not in a metaphor way, in a practical daily gravitational way. Everything in our house oriented toward Liam. I used to think I was fine with it. I used to think I had made peace. I hadn't. I'd just gotten good at calling the ceiling by a different name. My fiancé, Patrick, is an accountant, has been for 6 years. He's the kind of person who notices when numbers don't add up, not because he's paranoid, but because pattern recognition is just how his brain works. He grew up in a family where people talked about money plainly, where statements got reviewed and questions got answered, where trust was something you extended and then verified. That was foreign to me. In my family, asking about money was the same as accusing someone of something. You didn't do it. You smiled and you trusted and you were grateful. Patrick and I got engaged in October. We set the date for the following September fall in Asheville, where the leaves turn and the mountains go soft and gold. We found a venue outside the city, a restored farmhouse with a barn and string lights in a field that looked out over a ridgeline. We put down the deposit in November. We sent save the dates in January. By February, we had a seating chart, a caterer, a florist, and a dress that needed to be taken in slightly at the waist. When I told my parents, my mother cried, which she almost never does, and my father shook Patrick's hand for a long time without saying anything, which in his language was everything. For a few months, things were good. My mother texted vendor suggestions. My father asked about parking logistics. Liam said, "Congrats" at Christmas, and that was the extent of his involvement, which suited me fine. Then came March. My mother called on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner. I had chicken on the stove and my laptop open, and I was doing 3 things at once, which is how I always am. And when her name came up on my phone, I tucked it against my shoulder and kept stirring. "Liam's been offered something incredible," she said without hello. I waited. The Biltmore Foundation is hosting a charity gala in Asheville in September. One of his clients got him an invitation, and it's a real networking opportunity. Black tie, the kind of event that could change things for him. Liam works in private wealth management. I had no reason to doubt the story. I stirred the chicken. "That's great," I said. "It's the 21st, she said. The chicken kept cooking. My brain caught up a second later. "That's our wedding date." "I know." Her voice stayed warm, the practice kind of warm. "But you know how rarely something like this comes up for him. And Asheville, you're already going to be there. Maybe it's a sign." I put the spoon down. Mom, we have 60 guests booked, a venue with a contract, a photographer flying in from DC. Nothing's set in stone, she said. Everything is set in stone. That's what contracts are. She made a small sound, the one she made when she thought I was being difficult. Liam didn't plan this to conflict. These things just happen. Couldn't you look at maybe the weekend before? No. The warmth slipped a little. Rachel. No, I said again. We're not moving our wedding for a networking event. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm going to talk to your father. My father called 2 days later. He doesn't ease into things, he leads with the conclusion. Family comes before personal preference, he said. I was at my desk at work. I had a contract open on my screen that suddenly looked like static. It's our wedding, Dad. It's not a preference. It's the most important day of my life. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being accurate. Liam worked very hard to get where he is. This gala is important to his career. You're his sister. Sisters support each other. Brothers also show up to weddings. He inhaled slowly. If you're going to be this inflexible, then don't be surprised when this family responds accordingly. What does that mean? A pause. Then it means you need to think carefully about whether you want to make this a conflict. He hung up before I could answer. I sat at my desk for 10 minutes not moving. Then I called Patrick. Patrick listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, he didn't say that's crazy or I can't believe them or any of the things people say when they're performing sympathy. He just said, okay. Is there anything about the gala that doesn't add up to you? I thought about it. He gets invited to black tie charity events sometimes. It's not impossible. In Asheville specifically, on that specific weekend. I didn't answer. Okay, he said again. I'll look into it. I didn't ask him what that meant. With Patrick, it always means something methodical and quiet and thorough. The rehearsal dinner was 6 weeks later. My parents came. Liam came, which surprised me. He was charming the way he always is, working the room, making my aunt laugh, shaking hands with Patrick's father like they were old friends. I watched him and felt a particular exhaustion of loving someone you don't trust. Then dessert came, and then my mother stood up and smoothed her blazer and said there was a family situation and they left, all three of them. Liam followed without looking at me, which was somehow worse than if he'd made eye contact. Patrick sat very still for a moment. Then he turned to me and said quietly, under the hum of the room trying to recover, "After tonight, I need to show you something." That night, after we'd gotten home and I changed out of my dress and was sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, I do that when I'm processing things, I always have. The floor feels more honest than furniture. Patrick sat across from me and opened his laptop. "The gala," he said. "It's real, but it's not in September." I looked up. He turned the screen toward me. The Biltmore Foundation's charity events calendar. The gala was listed, October 14th. I stared at it. "It moved," I said, because I was still trying to give them something. "It was always in October," Patrick said gently. "I found the original save the date announcement from February. It's never been in September." The kitchen felt very quiet. "So Liam lied," I said. Patrick nodded once. "Or your parents did. Or all three of them did." I pressed my fingertips to the floor, cold tile, and tried to think. Why would they lie about that? What does it get them? Patrick was quiet for a moment. The particular quiet that means he's deciding whether to say the next thing. "Rachel," he said, "do you know about the account your grandfather set up for you?" I went still. My grandfather on my mother's side died when I was 19. I remembered the paperwork, the reading of the will, adult voices in a room I was allowed into but not fully included in. My mother had told me afterward, almost as a footnote, "Grandpa set aside some money for you, for when you're ready for a big moment. A house, a wedding, whatever you need. Your dad is managing it for now." I had never asked to see a statement. In my family, that would have meant I didn't trust them. "I know it exists," I said carefully. "Do you know the balance?" I assumed around 30,000. That's what she said when I asked once, years ago. Patrick closed the Gala tab and opened something else, a series of documents, scanned. I recognized my father's handwriting on some of them. There was a name I didn't recognize on the account heading. The account was structured as a custodial fund, Patrick said. Your dad had management authority. I found the original documentation from your grandfather's estate. He left $62,000 specifically designated for you. 62,000. I hadn't known that number. Nobody had told me that number. Patrick, there have been withdrawals, he said. His voice stayed even. Not cold, just steady, the way he is when he's telling me something he wishes he didn't have to. Over the last 4 years. I found transfer records. I had to work through some indirect channels. Some of it took a while, but the paper trail is there. He turned the screen again. I looked at the numbers, at the dates, at the memo lines which said things like family expenses and loan, Liam, and, once with no memo at all, $18,000 transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I counted. Then I counted again. That's $44,000, I said. 44,300, Patrick said, over 4 years. I sat on my kitchen floor and said nothing for a long time. The gala made sense now, not because Liam needed to attend it, because they needed me not to have a wedding, or to delay it long enough that I wouldn't think to look at the account, wouldn't think to ask for the remaining balance, wouldn't know there was supposed to be anything left. There's more, Patrick said. I looked at him. He pulled up a text thread, his own phone, something forwarded to him by a mutual contact who'd rather stay unnamed, someone who'd overheard something they probably weren't supposed to. Liam, texting my father, if she pushes for the wedding fund, what do we say? Is there enough left to cover it? My father, texting back, there's 18 left. We can say the market affected it. She won't push. Liam, she might now that she's with Patrick. He's the type. My father, then we need her to move the date. Buy some time. I read it twice. The second time, the words didn't get clearer. They just got more real. He's the type. As if due diligence was a character flaw. As if noticing a problem was the problem. I set Patrick's phone down very carefully on the tile between us. How long have you known? I asked. I found the withdrawal records 3 weeks ago. The texts came through 2 nights ago. He paused. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. You've been carrying this for 3 weeks. I didn't want to show you a maybe. I looked at my fiancé sitting cross-legged on our kitchen floor at 11 o'clock at night, having spent weeks quietly building a case file because he noticed something I'd been trained not to notice. And I felt something crack open in my chest that wasn't quite sadness and wasn't quite relief. It was more like the feeling you get when a window finally opens in a room that's been closed too long. I didn't call my parents that night. I didn't call Liam. I've worked in contracts long enough to know that you don't show your hand before you know what hand you have. We talked to an attorney the following week. She was a woman in her 50s who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and did not waste words. She reviewed the original estate documents, the account structure, and the transfer records Patrick had assembled, and then she explained to us very clearly what had happened. My father had had legitimate custodial authority. That authority had conditions. The funds were designated for specific life milestones, not general family use. The transfers to Liam didn't meet those conditions. The fact that Liam's name appeared on memo lines made him a documented recipient. You have a clear basis for a demand letter, she said. And depending on how they respond, civil action is a real option. Patrick asked several questions about documentation. I sat in the leather chair across from her desk and thought about my grandfather, who used to take me fishing at a lake outside Greensboro when I was small, who called me his sensible one, who I had never once heard lie about anything. He had set that money aside for me specifically. He had said big life moment. He had known, somehow, that I would need it. The attorney drafted the letter. We held it. We had a wedding to get through first. The week before the wedding, my mother called again. She was bright and warm and acted like the rehearsal dinner walkout had been some minor miscommunication. I just want everything to be beautiful for you, she said. Then be there, I said. Of course we'll be there. Small pause. Has Patrick looked into whether the venue has any flexibility on dates? No. I just think if everyone could be fully present. Liam is choosing not to come to his sister's wedding for a gala that isn't even in September. That's his choice. Come or don't, Mum. I'm not moving it. Silence. Then, you've changed. I've been paying attention, I said. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a moment, and then I went back to finalizing the seating chart. September 21st arrived the way good days sometimes do, too clear, too golden, almost suspicious in its beauty. The mountains outside Asheville were just starting to turn, the edges of the trees catching orange and red like something slow burning. The farmhouse was draped in white, the barn doors were open, the field smelled like cut grass and the particular sweetness of early fall. My aunt walked me down the aisle. My father's chair in the front row had someone else's name carved on it. Patrick's family filled their side completely. His mother cried from the first song. His younger sister caught my bouquet and screamed loud enough that everyone laughed. My side was thinner, not empty. I have friends who showed up fiercely, cousins who drove from 3 states away, but there were gaps. Known gaps. The kind that have a shape. I didn't cry during the ceremony. I've never been a crier, not in public. I said my vows looking at Patrick, and I meant every word, and the mountain behind us was enormous and indifferent, and I thought, this is enough. This is actually enough. At the reception, after dinner, after the first dance, after the toasts from Patrick's best man and my college roommate who made everyone laugh and then cry in the same 90 seconds, Patrick stood up. He hadn't told me exactly what he was going to say. I knew something was coming. I'd seen him talking quietly to the venue coordinator earlier, and I recognized the look on his face, focused, deliberate, the look he gets when he's worked out a plan and is ready to execute it. The room settled as he reached for the microphone. 112 people, in a barn strung with warm light, going quiet the way they do when something real is about to happen. I want to say something, Patrick began. That isn't in the usual wedding speech format. Politi laughter. Most of you know that Rachel's parents and her brother didn't come today. Some of you saw what happened at the rehearsal dinner. He paused. I think you deserve to know why. And more than that, I think Rachel deserves to have the truth said out loud in a room full of people who love her. The barn went very still. Patrick nodded to the venue coordinator. A screen lit up at the far end of the barn. We planned to use it for a photo slideshow later, but the first image wasn't a photo. It was a document. Clean, formatted, official-looking. Account records with certain lines highlighted. Rachel's grandfather set up a fund for her when she was 19, Patrick said. $62,000 designated specifically for her. For a wedding, a house, a major life moment. Her words from his estate documents. He let that land. Over the last 4 years, $44,000 was withdrawn from that account, most of it transferred to her brother. The memo lines say things like family expenses and loan. He clicked to the next slide, the text message thread, printed cleanly. If she pushes for the wedding fund, what do we say? She won't push. Then we need her to move the date, buy some time. Someone near the back made a sound, not a word, just breath, involuntary. The gala they cited as a reason for asking Rachel to move her wedding, Patrick continued, is in October. It was always in October. We have the foundation's original event announcement from February, another click. The Biltmore Foundation calendar, October 14th, circled. A table near the front, Patrick's aunt started whispering. Someone reached across and touched someone else's hand. Rachel didn't know about any of this until 6 weeks ago, Patrick said. She spent 29 years being told that asking for proof was the same as disrespecting the people who loved her. She spent 29 years being taught to shrink. He stopped for a moment. I've known her for 4 years. I have never once seen her be anything other than steady, patient, fair, willing to give people more chances than they'd earned. He looked at me then. The room must have been watching both of us. I wasn't looking at the room. She deserves to have someone say clearly in front of everyone who showed up today, this was not her fault. This was done to her, and it's going to be answered. I pressed my thumbnail hard against my palm because I knew if I didn't give myself something small to feel, I was going to cry in front of 112 people, and I'd been holding it together for 6 months and I didn't know what I would do once I stopped. I stopped holding it together. Not loudly. Not dramatically, just the tears came, fast and hot, and I pressed my fingers under my eyes and looked at the ceiling for a second, and then looked back at Patrick, who was still holding the microphone, still looking at me, steady as anything. "You are the best contract I have ever signed," he said. Laughter broke through the quiet, like a window opening. My college roommate started crying again. Patrick's mother was already at maximum. He set the microphone down and walked back to our table, and I grabbed his hand and didn't let go for the rest of the night. The demand letter went out the Monday after the honeymoon. We didn't announce it. We didn't post about it. We didn't call my parents to warn them because the letter itself was the warning. My mother called that Wednesday. Her voice did not sound like a woman who had been caught. It sounded like a woman who had been wronged. "How could you humiliate us like that?" she said, "in front of all of Patrick's family, in front of people we've never even met." "You humiliated yourself," I said. "Patrick just made sure people knew why your chairs were empty. That money was managed for you. Your father made investments. Investments to Liam's personal account. You don't understand how these things work." "I have an attorney who does," I said. "You hear from her." My father called an hour later. His message was 5 words. "You are making a mistake." I didn't respond. Liam texted me that night. A long message about family loyalty and how I'd always been cold and how Patrick had clearly influenced me. And did I really think this was who I wanted to be? I read it once. Then I typed back, "The account documentation doesn't care who influenced me." He didn't respond after that. The negotiation took 11 weeks. There were counterclaims and guilt trips and one phone call from a family friend my parents had apparently recruited to mediate, who called me sweetheart twice in the first minute and then seemed surprised when I declined to find that charming. In the end, the remaining balance, $18,000, was transferred to an account in my name only. A formal repayment agreement was drawn up for the rest, structured over 3 years with teeth in it, as the attorney put it. Real consequences for missed payments. I didn't get all of it back. Some of it is gone the way money goes when it's been spent on ski trips and restaurant tabs and whatever else Liam decided he needed. But the debt is documented. The obligation is real, and it can no longer be managed away with a smooth voice and a conversation I wasn't supposed to question. A few months after the wedding, I ran into someone from my parents' neighborhood at a grocery store in Greensboro. She's known my family since before I was born, one of those women who was at every birthday party and has opinions about everyone's choices. She lived with me across the produce section like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to approach. Then she did anyway. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. "At the wedding." "Word gets around," I said. She was quiet for a moment, rearranging something in her cart that didn't need rearranging. "I always thought," she started, then stopped. "I always thought your parents were so proud of you. I never understood why it never quite looked that way. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. 'I'm glad you have Patrick,' she said. I told her thank you and meant it and drove home thinking about what she'd said. Proud of you. The performance of it versus the practice of it. How my parents could tell a whole neighborhood they were proud of me while quietly arranging that the money my grandfather left me got redirected to my brother's lifestyle, while constructing a fake scheduling conflict to buy time before I noticed, while walking out of my rehearsal dinner and my wedding both like they were making a point. They were making a point, they just weren't the ones in control of what it meant. I still have my grandfather's original letter, the one he wrote alongside the will, that the attorney's office gave me in a sealed envelope I didn't open until last November. He wrote it in his handwriting, the same cramped cursive he used for grocery lists and birthday cards. It says, "Rachel, you have always known what things are worth. Don't let anyone talk you out of that. This is for when you're ready to build something." I have it in a frame on the wall of the home office Patrick and I are turning into something real. In the house we are buying in Charlotte with what's left of the fund and what we saved ourselves and the careful, honest math of 2 people who pay attention. I don't talk to my parents much now. Not by design, not as a punishment, just because the silence is honest in a way the relationship wasn't. Maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't. I've stopped measuring the space where they should be and started measuring what's actually there instead. Patrick comes home from work on Thursdays with takeout from the Thai place on Central. We eat it on the couch with bad TV on and talk about nothing in particular. He never asks me to be smaller than I am. He never makes me feel like attention to detail is a character flaw. I spent 29 years being managed. It turns out I was never difficult to love. I was just being loved by the wrong people. There's a version of this story where I never find out, where Patrick notices something off in a document and decides it's not his place to say anything, where I walk into our marriage carrying a debt I didn't know I had, not a financial one, but the kind that sits in your chest and makes you smaller every year without you understanding why. That version almost happened. I was trained for it. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the theft itself, not the fake Gala, not the text message that said she won't push, but the years of conditioning that made all of it possible. My father didn't need to hide the transfers carefully. He just needed me to keep being the daughter who didn't ask questions, who confused trust with obedience, who thought paying attention to her own life was somehow ungrateful. And I was that daughter for a long time. I was good at it. What changed wasn't me becoming someone harder or colder or more suspicious. What changed was that I married someone who grew up in a house where questions were allowed, and his normal became visible to me by contrast. Patrick didn't teach me to distrust my family. He just lived differently enough that I could finally see the difference. That's what I think about when people ask if I regret how everything went. The answer is no, but not because of the money. The 18,000 that was returned, the repayment agreement, the documentation with teeth in it, those matter, but they're not the point. The point is that my grandfather wrote a letter that said you have always known what things are worth. Don't let anyone talk you out of that. And for 29 years, I let people talk me out of it anyway. He saw something in me I couldn't see in myself yet. Actions have weight. That's not a religious idea or a philosophy I read somewhere. It's just something I've watched play out with my own eyes. My parents spent years making small choices, redirect a fund, tell a small lie about a gala, walk out of a rehearsal dinner to make a point. Each one felt manageable to them, I think, because none of them looked that large in isolation. But they accumulated. They built a structure. And when Patrick put that structure on a screen in a barn in Asheville in front of 112 people, it was recognizable for exactly what it was. Not a misunderstanding, not a family quirk, a pattern. And Liam, he's the one I think about most honestly because I loved him. I still do, in the complicated way you love someone you grew up with, someone who knows the same rooms and the same voices you do. But he knew it was my fund. He said so in his own words in a text to our father. He just decided that his comfort was worth more than my inheritance. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. And choices like that have a way of defining what a person actually is, regardless of what they say at Christmas or how easily they can charm a room. I'm not angry anymore. I was, for a while. But anger that big takes a lot of maintenance, and I have better things to do with the energy. What I am is clear. Clear in a way I've never been before. About what I'll accept and what I won't. About the difference between keeping the peace and simply being managed. About the fact that you can love people and still hold them accountable. That those two things are not opposites even when the people involved insist they are. I think the version of me who never found out would have been fine by most measures, functional, capable. She'd have had a nice life in a smaller shape than she deserved. I prefer this version, the one who asked for the statement, the one who read the letter her grandfather left and finally believed it.